Welcome back.
Thank you.
We are 82A, discussing the idea of bringing blood that does not belong inside what's called the heichal, the holy area, not the holy of holies, but the holy area. If you bring that in, it's going to be invalid. So just now we had a parable by Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Shmuel. That just like if someone is getting poured water into his wine to dilute it, and he's using hot water, and then the person tells him, I want hot water. So isn't that obvious? You're talking about hot water. Why do you have to mention hot water? The answer is to tell you that I even want hot water, not only cold water, but even hot water. So to the Torah, when it repeats the word chatas twice, it's already talking about chatas. Why does it repeat it? To teach you, even a chatas that's brought inside is going to be invalid because some of the sin offerings could be brought inside. So you would have thought maybe it should be good. Even if you bring the blood of an outer chatas offering inside, it should be good. To that, the Torah tells you chatas. That was yesterday. Now, Maskev Rav Huna bereid Rav Yeshua. Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, said, Michdi israbu kol hakachim legabe mizbeach leinyan merika v'shtifa. So there's interesting halacha that you always have to wash out very well all the all the vessels that you use for the offerings, because what's going to happen if every vessel absorbs some of that sacrifice. Now what's going to happen if the parts that are absorbed, what's called the blias, the parts that are absorbed are left overnight? That's also a problem of nosar, of not leaving. You can't leave your meat overnight. You can't leave the parts that are absorbed overnight either. So you have to make sure it gets washed out. So now, says the Gemara, that verse, the verse that we're talking about, the verse right before it, includes all kachim for this halacha. It doesn't make a difference what you are, a chatas, an asham, a shlamim, whatever it is. To make sure your vessels are totally cleaned and purged from any potential nosar issues. So then the next verse mentions the chatos. Chatos, the kasher from Lamali. Why did it mention chatos? Shmamino chatos in midiach benilo, to teach you specifically that a chatos blood that's supposed to be outside is brought inside the heichal is going to be invalid. And you want to know a parable for this? I'll tell you a parable. It's like a student who's diluting wine for his Rebbe, and he's with cold water, with hot water, and then either one, he's doing both of them or switching off. And then the Rebbe tells him, Amarlo, al tim zagli elechan. Listen, I only want hot water right now. Okay? Just pour me hot water into my cup. So to the Torah says the same thing. It's talking about all sacrifices in terms of cleaning them from potential nosar issues. And then it says, by the blood, chatos, to teach you what? Only a sin offering and not other offerings can have this restriction, have this prohibition of the outside blood cannot be brought inside. So what must be the reasoning of Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva said it doesn't only apply by a chatos, right? Rabbi Akiva said in the Mishnah, it's going to apply by all the sacrifices. So what could be the reasoning? What could be the reasoning for Rabbi Akiva? Where's our Mishnah? We just got it. Yeah, the bottom of the previous page. Rabbi Akiva said, yeah, all the blood is going to be invalid. And the Chachamim said only a chatos. So Chachamim, okay, we just explained, but what does Rabbi Akiva? At the time, Rabbi Akiva, he learns from the word me chatas, from a chatas, vikol chatas. Extra word. Where do we see this? That he says this. The Tanya, it says in a brayso chatas in the elechatos. Kache kadashim minayin. Only a chatas is mentioned in the Torah if you bring its blood where it's not supposed to go inside. It's going to be invalid. How do I know other holy sacrifices like an asham, like an ola? Talmud lomer kol chatas, all chatas. The word kol includes the rest of the sacrifices. Kachim kalam minayin. How about other sacrifices that are less holy, like a shlamim, a bechor, meiser? Talmud lomar vikol chatas. The vav vikol chatas. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Amar lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili says back to Rabbi Akiva. Filu atamar bekol yom kul eni shemelach. You can use all the inclusions you want. I'm not going to listen to you. Ela chatas It says chatos eni lechatos. It says chatos and is referring to a regular sin offering. Ela chatos yachid, a personal sin offering. Chatos tzibur minayin. How do I know about a communal sin offering? Hamlam or kol chatos, any chatos, even a communal one. The eni ela chatos zakar chatos nekeva minayin. That's all good by a male chatos. A female chatos, what's the source? Hamlam or vikol, and all. Says the more 1 second. Klap elaya. Your logic is totally flawed. You want to tell me that a male chatos is more simple than a female chatos? A regular chatos is female, not male. So that logic doesn't make any sense. Ella, you're right. This is what it means. You have to say, of course, a chatos nekeva is that's the simplest case. That's a regular sin offering. Chatos zachar minayin. How do I know a male chatos could be included? Tamadom or bit kol chatos. That's I mean with the word bit kol. So you have a regular chatos, a communal chatos, and a male chatos. That's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, but it's not going to come to include any other offerings. The sub Rabbi Yossi Aglili, hayikra lahachud also. 1 second. Rabbi Yossi Aglili uses this verse to teach you these inclusions. We have Rabbi Yossi Aglili using it for something else. The Hatanya Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer Kol Ha'inyan Kulo Yem Medaber LeBepar Manisrofim Usiyir Manisrofim Lives Psuleim Abei Sabir of Alamar B'Lo Yisasa Ala Chilasa. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that these verses are talking about the bulls that are burnt and the goats that are burnt to teach you that you have to burn them in a specific place, special place where they're all burnt, and if you don't do it, it's going to be a negative commandment. So, to which they asked him, how does Rabbi Yossi really know that if you bring the blood inside, outer chatas blood inside the holy area, that that's going to be invalid? Amar Lam, Hain Lo Hova. From a different verse, not from the verse that we were talking about, rather a verse 5 verses earlier. It says, Hain Lo Hova as Dama, Kodesh Apanima, don't bring the blood into the holy area. So what do you mean, Rabbi Yossi Aglili teaches me from the pasuk in the 6th chapter, the 23rd verse, that says, V'chol chatos? Doesn't he already teach us this from 5 verses earlier? It says, Hain Lo Hova. You can't bring the blood in. Says the Gemara, you're right. L'dvar Rabbi Akiva Kamar. Rabbi Akiva, who interpreted the verse chatos, kol chatos, v'kol chatos, to include all the sacrifices. Rabbi Yosef really is just saying, if I were to use that verse, I would use it for the other exposition. In reality, he doesn't use that verse. He uses a verse earlier, Hein lo huva as dama al kodesh hapanima. That verse teaches you that you cannot bring the blood in from the outside to the inside. However, if Rabbi Akiva is going to use the verse chatas, kol chatas, v'kol chatas, so he's going to tell you, listen, I have 3 other ways to interpret that verse. Even in your world, I can interpret it differently. Okay, so that is that. Says the Mishnah. Chatos shekibel dama b'shnei kosos. Now, let's say you have the blood of a chatos in 2 cups. Either your cups are too small or there is too much blood. So you have 2 cups. Now what happens? Yotza echad men l'chutz. One of the cups exits the premises. It leaves the courtyard. Does that invalidate the other cup? Says the Mishnah, no. Hapnimi kasher. The inner cup is valid. Just because. Now, there's a general prohibition. You cannot bring things outside the courtyard. The psul yotze. You can't bring the meat outside. You can't bring. Yeah. At least by a chatas, by kachim kalim, maybe you could. At least by these sacrifices, you cannot bring it outside. So that blood itself is for sure invalid. The question is, does it affect its friend, its partner in crime, the other cup of blood? Does it affect it negatively? So the answer is no. Now, what if you go the other way? We just told you that you cannot bring in blood that does not belong into the holy area, into the heichal. You cannot bring it in. So let's say you have 2 cups, and one of the cups is brought inside. Does that invalidate the other cup? Nichnas echad mehem lifnim. Rabbi Yossi Aglili machshir bachitzon. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says it's the same thing as we just had. One cup is not going to affect the other cup. The Chachamim Omrim post a note. Chacham argue and say it will invalidate it. So everyone agrees if you bring one of the cups outside the courtyard, the other one's not going to be invalid. They disagree If you bring a cup inside the holy area, is the cup outside the holy area going to be invalid? Rabbi Yosef says it will be fine, and the Chachamim say it will be invalid. Now, Rabbi Yosef is going to say a Kal V'chomer, which are going to go back and forth for like basically the next daf. So Amar Rabbi Yosef like this, back to Pigel. Yeah, we know that if you have in mind, if you slaughter a sacrifice, and you have in mind to consume it outside is the courtyard, outside the courtyard, that's going to be invalid. And yet what happens? The place that the machshava, your thoughts, can invalidate, meaning outside the courtyard, that's a stringency. It does not make the other one, the one that if you take now blood outside the courtyard, it's not going to make the other cup of blood like itself, meaning you take a cup of blood outside the courtyard, the cup that's in the courtyard is still kosher. So what do you see? That's a leniency. You have a stringency that your machshava, your thought, if you have in mind to consume it outside the courtyard, will invalidate. And yet you have a leniency that if you physically take one of the cups outside the courtyard, it's not going to make the other one like it. It will not invalidate it. Okay. So now, if you have in mind to slaughter a sacrifice on the outer altar, but you have in mind you're going to consume its meat next to the inner altar, that is not pigel. That's not going to invalidate it. At least it won't be pigel. So what do you see? That's much more lenient. So it should for sure have this leniency. It should for sure have the leniency of, if you bring one of the cups inside, it should not be able to invalidate its friend. Just like outside, where it's so stringent, because if you have outside in mind when you're slaughtering to consume on the outside of the courtyard, it will invalidate it. So that's a stringency, and yet it has a leniency. So in a place where it does not have a stringency, like inside the holy area, for sure it should have the leniency. That is Rabbi Yosef Lili's Kal V'chomer. We're going to go back and forth about that for a long time. So, Nichnas L'chaper. So now, when you bring the blood inside, that's not supposed to be there. At what point do we say it's invalid? Is it the mere walking in with it that's invalid? Or it's only once he uses it to atone, meaning he applies it, he sprinkles it, he throws it onto the altar, then we say it's invalid. So you brought blood from the outer chatas offering inside, where you're not supposed to bring it. Is that automatically invalidated, or only once you apply it, it's going to invalidate it? So, Nichnas L'chaper Shlo Apostle, Rabbi Eliezer says that just bringing it in is going to invalidate. Rabbi Shimon Omer Achi Chaper. No, you have to actually apply it, and then it's going to be invalid. Rabbi Yehuda says a cryptic thing, which we're going to get back to at the very end of the chapter, and about a daf to a daf and a half. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Im Hichnis Shogeg Kasher. If you bring it in inadvertently, it's going to be okay. Obvious question. And if you bring it in inadvertently, so then what? Does the mere bringing in invalidate, or does the application invalidate? That is a question. Kol hadamim psulin shenasnu agavim mizbeach. Now, all the blood, all the invalid blood, whatever blood is invalid to be applied, if you go and apply it, lo hurtza, it's not going to appease, not going to atone. Lo hurtza hatzitz, the tzitz, the part of the Kollel on the top of his forehead, the tzitz that says on it, I'm holy to God, Kodesh LaHashem, it's not going to atone el al atameh. Amazing thing. You have meat that's invalid because it's impure. If that goes on the altar, so that the tzitz, the special power of the clothing of the Kohen Gadol, that it atones for it, it appeases for it, and therefore it's going to be valid. But that's only true by the meat that's going to be impure. That's not going to apply by the other invalidation. The tzitz is only going to appease, only going to atone for the invalid meat that's impure. But if you take the meat outside the courtyard, and then you bring it back in, you put it on the altar, that's invalid. That's called a psul yotze. That the tzitz is not going to atone for. Okay. Now we're going to go with this kal v'chomer. Once again, you have two areas. You have outside the courtyard, right? You have outside the courtyard, and you have, right, that's on one extreme. Then you have the middle area. Then you have inside, which is called the holy. It's called the heichal. So now, they each have different rules. So what we know for sure is that the outside the courtyard, if you have in mind when you slaughter an animal or you do one of the 4 services and you have in mind it's going to be consumed outside the courtyard, that's called pigel, and that's going to invalidate it. However, if you have 2 cups of blood and one of them is brought outside the courtyard, that's a leniency. It does not make the other one invalid. Okay, and Rabbi Yosef really says, through the derivation of a kal v'chomer, through a kal v'chomer, that bringing blood inside the heichal, the holy area, should also not invalidate the other cup, since pigel doesn't apply over there. Okay, so now, Tanya, Rabbi Yosef, kal v'chomer, mama makom shemachshav pasel, b'chutz lo pasel, dam shebechutz, lo pasel, dam shebechutz, esh shebifnim, makom she'ein machshav pasel b'fnim, ein adin shlo yifsol, dam shebifnim, esh shebechutz. So this is Rabbi Yosef Li's kal v'chomer. In the place where your thought invalidates, which is outside the courtyard, yet when you bring a cup out, it's not going to invalidate the other cup. So a place where your thought does not invalidate, the holy area, the heichal, for sure bringing a cup over there is not going to invalidate the other cup. Okay. Amrulo, in the Brisa, the Chachamim said back, the rabbi said back to Rabbi Yosef Li, what do you mean? Harei Omer asher yuva midama afilu mixas dama. I have a pasuk telling me that even if I bring midama from the blood, the mem is always telling a part of the blood, even part of the blood that's brought inside will invalidate the whole thing. So Rabbi Yosef Amar Lami says that time kal v'chomer leyotze me'ata. Okay, so you should have a kal v'chomer then. Go the other way. Says Rabbi Yosef, I'm going to challenge you. If you're right, I have a challenge for you. Just like inside, where there is no your machshava, your thought does not invalidate, and yet what happens? Your blood that's brought inside will invalidate the other blood. It'll invalidate the other blood. So now, makom shemachshava poseles, where you have the very strict case of your thought process will invalidate if you have in mind to consume it outside the courtyard. So then, I don't understand. According to you rabbis, there should be a kal v'chomer that should invalidate the blood that's brought outside the courtyard. If you have 2 cups of blood and one is brought outside the courtyard, that should invalidate the other blood inside. Because in the place where you don't have a stringency of pigel like inside, and yet it invalidates, in the place where you have the stringency outside the courtyard, it should for sure invalidate. So according to you, how do you explain the first rule of the first law in our Mishnah? Amrulo, they said back to him, Harehu Omer, Asher Yuva, Hanichnas Posel, Ve'ein Hayotze Posel. Look carefully at the verse. It says Asher Yuva. Yuva means anything that's brought inside. To bring from outside to in will invalidate, but not from inside to out. It's interesting that in Masechah Shabbos, in the very beginning, it makes the same distinction. There's something called Hachnasa, and there's something called Hotzah. Hotzah is bringing from inside to out, and Hachnasa is bringing from outside in. So it's the same thing over here. The pasuk says only if you bring the blood, Asher Yuva. Yuva means to bring it inside. Only that's going to invalidate. So that's how the Chachamim get out of it. Okay. So another attempted kal v'chomer. You should now say, based on a kal v'chomer, that if you have in mind to consume a sacrifice, which is supposed to be consumed outside of the holy area, you have in mind to consume it inside the heichal, that should be pigel. Why? Mikal v'chomer, from a kal v'chomer. Just like a place where if you bring the blood outside the courtyard, you have 2 cups. 1 cup is outside the courtyard. It's not going to invalidate the cup inside. So makom shepasol dam shebefnim as dam shebechutz eino din shtei machshava poseles befnim. So for sure, if you have inside where you say that the blood does invalidate the other blood, you have 2 cups of blood. One you bring incorrectly, you bring it inside the holy area, and yet it invalidates the other blood. So for sure, pigul should apply over there. That'd be a very simple kal v'chomer. Why don't we say that pigul applies when you have in mind to consume it inside the holy area? It only applies by outside the courtyard. So says the Gemara, which is going to be a repetition of a long time ago, Harehu Omer Bayom Hashlishi. The verse by pigul says Bayom Hashlishi, which literally means outside the right time. It's referring to Yom Hashlishi, outside the right time. So the Makom Shem Sholosh, the Dav, the Basar, and the Emurim. The Gemara there learns out that Shlishi here is referring to an area that has all three. An area that you can apply blood, consume meat, and burn burn up the fats. So what area is that? That is an area that at one point in history was outside the Beis Hamikdash, where you're able to bring it up on a bama on the mountains. However, it cannot be referring to inside the holy area because there you can never consume the meat. We don't find that meat can be consumed inside the holy area. So the word shlishi, which the Gemara earlier really went through, how you get from that word shlishi to misholosh. So here is just paraphrasing it. So, yeah, I believe it was the extra word. It said pigul and yom hashlishi. It was repetitive. So pigul was referring to outside the right time, and shlishi was referring to outside the right place. I think. So either way, that's how you know that the pasuk tells you that it has to be outside the courtyard in a place that at one point you could have brought all three, the blood and consume the meat and burn the fats. Okay, so let's try again. You should not have pigul apply to you should not have pigul apply to bachutz, to outside the courtyard. It shouldn't apply through a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? The kal v'chomer is as follows. Just like blood that's brought inside the courtyard will invalidate the blood that's brought will invalidate the blood that remains. You have 2 cups of blood, right? You say 1 chatas offering, 2 cups of blood. 1 cup is brought inside the holy area incorrectly. It will invalidate the other blood. So it has a stringency that it invalidates the blood. It has a leniency that pigul is not going to apply if you have that in mind. So then, now go the other way. Where you have already a leniency that the blood does not invalidate, for sure pigul should not apply. For sure, outside the courtyard, where one blood does not invalidate the other blood, for sure pigul should not apply. Talmud Lomar, Shlishi. I have to switch it here. Yeah. Shlishi zeu chutz l'zmano, pigul zeu chutz l'mkomo. The verse is to be repetitive. Shlishi tells you that it's outside the right time, and pigul tells you outside the right place, and therefore it has to be pigul is only going to apply like we just said before, only if it's outside. Only if it's outside in a place that has all three, which can only be outside the courtyard. Okay, let's try again. Basar hayotze lechutz pasol and hanichnas lifnim kasher. So interesting. Meat, if you bring the meat outside, that's called a psul yotze. That meat is invalid outside the courtyard. If you bring meat inside the holy area, hanichnas lifnim kasher. It's kosher. It's good. It's not invalid. Shi'e bedin she'pasol, but logically you should say it's invalid. Why? Just like the blood that's brought outside the courtyard does not invalidate the blood that remains inside. Basar hayotze lechutz pasol, and yet meat that's brought outside has a stringency that it's going to be invalid. So basar hayotze lechutz pasol. Yet it's invalid. So meaning you have one stringency that when you bring blood out, you have a leniency. Sorry, that when you bring blood outside the courtyard, it does not invalidate the other blood, and yet that area of outside the courtyard has a stringency that it invalidates the meat. So now makom she'pasol down shebifnim in the place that it's very stringent. If you have 2 cups and you bring one inside the heichal, the holy area, it does invalidate the blood, the other blood. So for sure, for sure it should have that stringency by the meat. By the meat that's brought inside, it should invalidate it. Why doesn't it not invalidate it? Arehu Omer mi dama v'lo basar. The verse itself tells you that it has to be blood and not meat. So okay, so say a kal v'chomer. So miato. So say from this say a kal v'chomer. Just like in the place, the inside, the holy area, where blood, if you have 2 cups of blood and one is brought inside, it will invalidate the blood, the other blood that you did not bring inside. It will invalidate it. Yet basar, yet meat, is kosher. It has a leniency, that has a stringency, that the blood will invalidate the other blood. It has a leniency that that area will not invalidate the meat. So now, an area outside the courtyard, which has a leniency that if part of the blood is brought outside the courtyard, it does not invalidate the other blood. So for sure, it should have the leniency of meat that's brought outside. Is it not logical that should have the leniency that it should not be invalid? Arehu Omer, ubasar besada treifa lo sochelu, kevan sheyatza basar chutz l'mechitzaso nesar. This is talking about not eating an avela, and it mentions the meat of the field. So what's the field for? Why is it mentioning the field? So from there we learn if you take something outside the courtyard, interesting. Outside the courtyard is already called the field, basar besada. So basar besada is called anything outside the courtyard is already called the field. So from there, you learn that you cannot bring the meat outside over there. That you cannot lo sochelu, you cannot eat it. Kevan sheyatza basar chutz l'mechitzaso nesar. Once it's brought outside the walls, the confines of the courtyard, it's going to be prohibited for consumption. These are all classic kal v'chomers, and basically the Gemara is agreeing, if not for the verses. You take one law, have a kal v'chomer to something else. Only way out is you have a verse. Say not that way, which we do. Okay. Now, that's that for the kal v'chomers. Now, this idea that you're going to bring something in to the holy area is going to invalidate it. So when the Torah says it, it talks about 2 things. It talks about the Kodesh, Penima. El HaKodesh Penima. Now, the word Penima means the Holy of Holies, and the word Kodesh means just the holy area. And we're going to figure out how you got to that conclusion. So, because to say both seems a little funny, because you have to get through one to get to the other, right? You can't get to, at first glance, you can't get to the Kodesh HaKadoshim without going through the Kodesh. So every time you're going to bring blood into the Kodesh, it's already going to be invalid. So where is the necessity for the other invalidation? So, hold that thought. Penima and the other Penima Heichal Minayin. It only says Penima, which is the Holy of Holies, the most inner part of the Beis Hamikdash. How do I know the regular holy area is also going to be invalid? Minayin. Kodesh Penima. Kodesh Penima. It says that's the holy area and the Holy of Holies. The Yomar Kodesh, the Al Yomar Penima. So, okay, just say Kodesh and don't say Penima, because you got to one, you have to get through the other. Amarava Bazev Alimid Al Zev. Says Rava that no, the actual word Kodesh and Penima, they don't have an objective definition that Penima means Holy of Holies. It's only because the Torah said Kodesh and Penima that one shines light on the other. It says 2 things. Okay, so one is holy and one is the most inner area. So comes Kodesh and teaches you that Penima is referring to the Holy of Holies. And now the Gemara gives an example where you find a similar thing. This is about a Kohen owing 2 kinds of servants that they cannot eat the truma. One is a temporary servant, meaning the temporary. He's only there for a few years, right? And one is there for life, meaning 50 years. The one that got his ear nailed in. So that guy, the one that's called the Nirtza, he's there until, it says forever, but forever means until Yovel. So how do you know which word means what? So Mida the Habi Atoshav V'Sachir. Sachir means a worker, Toshav means a resident. none of them objectively mean a permanent servant for 50 years, and other means a temporary one. How do you know? The Tanya Toshav Zekanu Kinyan Olam. It says that Toshav, that servant is someone who's acquired to you forever until Yovel. Sachir Zekanu Kinyan Shanim, and a Sachir is one who is only acquired to you for a number of years, 7 years. So Yomar Toshav, Al Yomar Sachir. Well, if just say Toshav and don't say Sachir, if a guy that's your servant for 50 years, forever, so to speak, can't eat Truma, for sure a guy is only your servant for 7 years, for sure can't eat Truma.
The one that said for 7 years can't eat in
the other way around. No. The guy for 50 years is more like you, no? He's more permanent. So you would have thought he should be able to eat, no?
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So Yomar, Yomar Sachir, Vani Yomer, Kanu Kinyan Olam. So I'll say, a guy who's acquired forever, so to speak, Kol Yovel, Eino Ochel, he can't eat, and he's much more a permanent resident in my house. Kanu Kinyan Shanam Kochkin, for sure, a guy who's there for a few years, for sure he can't eat. So Ilu Kena Yisi Omer. Well, it depends. If I only had the word Toshav, I would say maybe the word Toshav means Kanu Kinyan Shanim. It's a guy who's with me for 7 years. Aval Kanu Kinyan Olam Yehei Ochel, but maybe a guy who's there forever, 50 years, he would be able to eat. Says the Torah, Bas Sachir. It says it specifically says Sachir, Belimit al Toshav. The word Sachir, referring to one kind of servant, comes and teaches you, it shines light on the other kind, what Toshav means. The word Toshav does have a more permanent connotation than the word Sachir. So Sachir teaches you the more temporary servant, and Toshav teaches you the more permanent servant. Shezeh kanu kinyan olam, v'zeh kanu kinyan shana. One is a permanent servant, meaning there till Yovel, and one is only there temporarily. The einu ocha, and they both can't eat. Okay. So Abaye says, hold on, now that is the best comparison. I'm going to buy a bishlam mahasam trey gufein. The mamish, two separate bodies, two separate people. One is there with his ear for 50 years, and one is there only 50 years. The afal gav, the havle lekra, the michtav nirtza lo yochal. If the Torah wanted to make its point as clear as possible, how would it say it? Nirtza lo yochal. The one that got its ears, the one that got ears nailed, that guy can't eat truma. And then you would for sure know that the other kind of servant, through a kal v'chomer, also can't eat. If a guy that's there 50 years can't eat, for sure guy there for 7 years, he can eat. And yet the Torah didn't say it that way. Rather, what did it do? Other servant you can learn from a kal v'chomer, yet it didn't do that. Why? Because sometimes you have the following principle: milsa the asi b'kal v'chomer, tarach l'kasa l'kra. Something which could be learned out of a kal v'chomer, the Torah, so to speak, burdens itself and writes it out explicitly. Okay, that's over there. But elahacha over here, where it says kodesh pinima, the holy and a holy of holies, kevan the ipsal behechal. So lifnai v'lifnai mai boy, it's totally extra. What is the necessity of teaching me that if you bring blood into the holy of holies, it's going to be invalid, when if you bring it to the holy, it's going to be invalid? So what's the case? It's just totally unnecessary. Ella Marabaye, no. Lo nitzcha ella lederech meshufash. If you bring the blood in somehow, meshufash. What's meshufash? Through the roof, no? Through the crooked paths. What, when they're doing construction or something?
Through the roofs and upper chambers. Temple.
Through the roofs and upper chambers of the temple. Now, I asked a few people this morning. There's a chamber right behind the Kodesh HaKadosh. So, can you or can you not get in from there? So, if you could get in from there, the Gemara should give that answer. Unless you'll tell me that what? That's not normal. That's not a normal way to get in. I mean, you can climb through the window, but that's not a normal way to win. And this case of Mishupash, I guess, is a more normal way to get in through the. What, these upper chambers is not normal? It's only when you get in. Yeah.
Yeah. Why is it you get in any other way?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So if you go in, Rashi learned that it means if you go in through the roofs of the upper chambers. So I'm saying, is that a normal way to get in? If it's not normal, so then what about the chamber behind the kosher kedushin, down through the window? Why did the Gemara say that case? So maybe it's more normal, maybe it's only there for for fixing purposes, meaning it is a normal way to go, but we only do it, in certain situations. I don't know. Okay. Amalei Rava says Rava, Vaha Hava Tivbe. It says Hava, it says if you enter. And here Hava means entering in a normal way. Okay, here's the answer. According to Rava, at least. Rava says Hava means normal. Not normal to go from the upper chamber into the kosher kedushin. That's not how we bring our blood. So that's not normal. So why do you have the case of the Holy of Holies? Very interesting. Any blood you have in mind to bring into the Holy of Holies, even though generally blood is invalid to bring into the holy area if it doesn't belong there, but if you have in mind to bring into the Holy of Holies, it's not going to be invalid until you get there. Which is an interesting thing. So sounds like part of the Torah's obligation, restriction, prohibition is have in mind to bring the blood into the holy area. If you don't have that in mind, you have in mind to bring it to the Holy of Holies, so then it's not going to be invalid. It'll only be invalid once you enter the Holy of Holies. Okay. By Rava, says Rava, Parham Davar Shel Tzibur, that Horios bull that we spoke about at length, that is brought when the congregation makes a mistake based off an inadvertent ruling of the Sanhedrin, or the Seir Avodas Kachavim, or you transgress inadvertently Avodas Kachavim, Avodah Zarah, idol worship. That blood, Shehechnes Daman Lifnai V'Lifnim Mahu. What's with that blood? If you bring that blood inside, what's the law? Mi Amrinan El HaKodesh Penima Kol Hechad Dekarinan El HaKodesh Karinan Le Penima Kol Hechad Lo Karinan El HaKodesh Lo Karinan Penima Odilma Shalobim Komanhu. So this is usually once again, this Parl Halam Davar. So the mitzvah is that you get atonement inside the holy area, and you go and you bring it inside the Holy of Holies. So what do we say? One second. Sorry. Do we say, meaning here you actually bring the blood into the holy area? So do we say that only something which is invalid if you would bring it into the holy area will be invalid if you bring it to the Holy of Holies? And therefore, this would not be invalid because this you're allowed to bring to the holy area? Or do you say no? Anytime you bring blood into the Holy of Holies, if it's out of place, then it's going to be invalid. I mean, these words, Ela Kodesh Penima, are they linked or are they not linked? Do you have to have one invalidation, have the other invalidation? Or no, as long as it's not in its place, that's going to be enough already. So, yeah. If you'll tell me that it's out of place and that's why it's going to be invalid. So what about Parvis Yom Kippurim? Part of the blood service is you got to sprinkle towards the staffs of the Aron Kodesh inside the Holy of Holies. What happens if you remove that blood outside and then came back in? Is it now invalid? Mi Amrina, look, Mekomanu, it's in its right place. Oh, Dilma, no, but Hov Nafak Nafak. Or no, you exited and therefore now it's invalid. Even if you do it now back in its place, you go back inside the Holy of Holies, doesn't matter. Maybe you'll tell me if once you exit, it's invalid. If you bring it back in, it's going to be invalid. So he's a midaman ala paroches, the hotilim is back, the blood that's supposed to be sprinkled onto the paroches, outside the Holy of Holies, onto the curtain. If you bring that outside, and then you put it back inside, what's the din? What's the halacha? Mahu hacha vadaychad makom. That's for sure one area, because it's that area. It's all in the holy area. So meaning you left the part by the kapores, by the paroches, but you're still in that area. So is that considered like leaving its place or not? No, if you leave that area where you're supposed to be sprinkling onto the covering, onto that separation, that's still called leaving. Teku. That we don't know. Okay, nichnas lechaper. We had an opinion that when you bring the blood in to the holy area and it's not supposed to be there, does it invalidate right when you walk in, or only when you actually atone for it? Tanya Rabbi Eliezer Omer Namar Kan lechaper because remember the kol adam lo yeh ba'ohel moed b'bo lechaper b'kodesh. We have Xer Shava here. It says to atone, and there it says a person should not go into the ohel moed if he is in a state of impurity. No. It means when the Kohen Gadol goes to do his service, there cannot be anybody found in the holy area. That's what it means. So here it says, so therefore what? Malahalan b'shelo kiper. The Kohen Gadol, as long as he enters into the Holy of Holies, there cannot be a person found in the holy area, even before he did any atonement. So to over here, bringing the blood in to a holy area that's not supposed to be there, even if you didn't actually put it onto the altar, you didn't atone, it's still going to be invalid. Afkan b'shelo kiper. That is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Nemar Kan lechaper, Nemar leholon, Nemar leholon, that's parachatas, that's seirachatas, asher huvan as damam lechaper. There it's talking about the bull and the goat that gets burnt. Yeah, that gets burnt. So malaholan b'shekiper, avkam b'shekiper. There you only burn it once you've atoned. That's when you burn it. So maybe you learn from over there. Not maybe he learns from over there that you have to first atone. Just like there, you burn after atonement. So to here, it's invalid only after atonement. The mere bringing in is not going to invalidate. The Maikim, what do they argue about? Rabbi Dovid and Rabbi Shimon. Why does one learn from the Kohen Gadol and one learn from an animal? Marsar done in chutz michutz. One is going to learn chutz michutz, meaning the invalidation. Ain't done in chutz mibifnim. So the first one, Rabbi Eliezer is going to learn. Chutz michutz, the ein danen chutz mi befnim. He's gonna learn that they both apply to things that were outside that can't be inside, but not things that are outside from inside. Umar savar danen behema mi behema, and the other opinion says you learn an animal from an animal. Ein danen behema mi adam. Just like the chatas offering is from an animal, so to the burnt offerings are also animals. I'd rather learn from an animal and not from a person.